So Mark, thank you so much for being today, mate.
That's okay.
You know that we know each other for a few years, and it's always been a pleasure to talk to you. So Mark is a chartered accountant with more than 10 years of experience in Australia. He runs his own business right now, a very successful business. It's a pleasure meeting you today.
Yes, you too. You too.
Amazing. So Mark, we got a big audience now with the Persian community in Australia who always come to me asking about accounting. So I knew you're the best guy to go to, the source of truth. So I want you to talk to them a bit more about the questions I have. First of all, the hot topics that everyone wants to know about is cryptocurrency. So can you lay out flat Australian stance on cryptocurrency, regulations, laws? How, because people want to do it. People think, oh, like decentralization. I don't want the government control. I don't want this. So can you lay flat about, is it traceable, the taxation laws? Is there any way to practice it legally and profit out of it? Like, just shed a bit of light over that.
Yeah. So there's obviously with crypto, there's a lot of platforms that are obviously government regulated. So there's a lot of platforms like Eshtrax and CoinSpot. They have to report to the ATO. So when you sign up with those guys, you usually have to give in your tax file number and your details because they're reporting to the ATO essentially with everything that you're doing, trading. So obviously they report directly to the ATO every year. So it will show up on your system with the ATO that you've had some crypto disposals or so on that side of things, if you're using one of the big platforms, they're usually going to be reporting to the ATO, so there's not really much you can do there. So it's always going to be essentially traced there. In terms of other platforms which may not be, that's obviously it can be a bit more, not traceable essentially.
And how much is the taxation on it?
So taxation on, again, it depends on what kind of trading you're doing. So if you're holding for a long term and selling after quite a long period of time, usually it's going to be treated as a capital gain. So we'll look at how much you bought it for, how much you sold it for. Obviously that difference there is what's being taxed, and that's just getting taxed at marginal tax rates in Australia. So, but the other side of it,
is the percentage?
Oh, it depends. So if you're earning between 45 to 135,000, which is probably the average tax bracket here in Australia, you're probably paying about 30 cents in every dollar.
Also, around 30% of your profit.
Your profit, yeah. But if you've held it for longer than a year, the profit is only being assessed at 50%.
Oh, okay. So across it, so it gets divided across the years you hold.
Yeah. So essentially, it's taxed in the year that you dispose it, and in the year that it's disposed of, we look at how much you bought it back when you did buy it. You look at the difference. If you've held it for longer than 12 months,
and you pay 50% tax on the capital gain tax.
So 50% of it is going into your tax return.
Oh yeah.
It's taxable income, so you're paying tax on that.
So 50%. So it comes 30% of that 50%.
Yes, that's right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So that's if you're if you hold it for longer than 12 months, and that's if you're doing it rarely. If you're doing it quite regularly,
it comes to income. It would go through Australian income tax.
Yes. So that would be no longer capital gain; it would just be your trading income because you're trading so often. So you're in the business of doing it. So there's no 50% discount there.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And mate, so it's legal in Australia if you do that, and if you go through different programs which is not government approved, it becomes. So
it is still legal to do it.
Yeah.
It's just that they don't report to the ATO, so it's.
And you have to do it yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so trading crypto. When does it become money laundering and illegal? So let's just start with the definition of money laundering. The reason I'm telling you, a lot of people out there, they think that, oh, let's not report that tax income, let's not report this, or let's do this, or let's do that. Let's transfer $5,000 between mates and all of those, and suddenly, rarely, but every now and then you get in trouble. So let's talk about the definition of money laundering and how some people very easily can be manipulated and fall into that category.
Yeah, look, it's just like any situation really. If it gets to the point where it's happening at a high degree and you're obviously asked some questions by the ATO, then that's when you have to provide reasonable answers and explanations. And if you can't, then obviously that's when it becomes an issue. So yeah, it's just a matter of.
And can you easily get into trouble with trading cryptocurrency if you're not reporting correctly and it becomes like money laundering?
Look, not particularly. It's just a very complex little area, because the only way that the ATO are going to have any information about it is either through those platforms or obviously happening, things that relate to you, whether it's bank accounts and money in and out. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So let's close the lid right now because I don't want to get into too much. So next topic we want to talk about, I want you to clearly explain the difference between ABN and TFL and the heaps and the perks of working under each. You know, so what are the benefits? You know, and the taxation, what it does. And I want you to tell this first, and why you want to tell me, like, why is it easier to get loans under ABN or TFL?
Yeah. So with working with your TFN, it's usually working as an employee. So usually you've got you pay a certain amount of wage. That's decide between yourself or your employer. They take out tax based on your tax rate, so you don't really need to worry about that at all. And then they also pay 11% super on top as well, which is just what's required as an employer here if you've got an employee. So when it comes to doing your tax returns every year, that's a lot more simple because it's a matter of tax taken out already. All you have to do is, and that's usually report to the ATO as well, so all you need to do is jump on the system online, which anyone can do themselves, put in some deductions for work, and pretty much lodge that. And that's not really going to be tax to pay unless there's different circumstances happening. So generally that's quite a straightforward thing. And usually if you look to go finance as an employee, that's much easier as well because it's set amount, it's coming from another party, it's something that can be relied upon for finance purposes, so usually it makes that a little bit easier.
And what about ABN?
ABN, a bit more to it, depending on what you're doing. Obviously you have to be in charge of your own tax, so tax that you pay to the ATO, no one's paying it for you, so you have to do it personally. So throughout the year when you're trading and making income, you just have to be putting some aside for savings towards that tax, because you will have to pay tax when the time comes.
And depending on what you do you have to pay GST if you're working on the ABN or?
Yes, so that will depend on how much you're making. So if your turnover, so your income that you've got coming in every year is over 75, it's over a 12-month period, it doesn't necessarily need a year, but over a 12-month period, if that's over 75, then generally you'll need to register GST. What that means is you have to, 10% of your income will have to go to the ATO.
So if one of our audience, some of them are like electricians, they're providing a service, right? And they earn, let's say, $200,000 a year under ABN. Do they have to pay GST?
Yes. Yeah. So in those circumstances, 10% of their income essentially to go to the ATO. It's not technically theirs in the ATO side. So with those situations, you either have to make sure you take that into account and you charging out, because otherwise you just essentially.
So is it true that some people think that working under ABN is better because you save more money and you make more compared to TFL?
It generally depends. So it will depend on how much you are making, and usually if you've got the two options and you're earning the exact same income as an ABN holder or through a TFN as an employee, it's usually just easier to just be an employee, just because there's less worries, less compliance, less things you need to do. It's a matter of showing up every day.
Yeah. So what if you're a tradie out there? Because I know a lot of my Persian friends who love to spend their money on shit and then fall short on cash. So it comes when you do your taxes and you're like $40,000 and you don't have the money. What happens then?
Yeah, well that's one main thing. Essentially. So if you're as an employee, you don't have to worry about that because tax is already paid, so you don't need to do too much there, and you're usually getting a small refund if anything. If you've got an ABN, you usually will have a tax bill, and that's why you need to be putting money away, otherwise you will be hit with a tax bill. In that case, look, the ATO are flexible and they'll be able to get payment plans in place, whether it's over 12 months or 2 years, 3 years usually maximum. The only thing to take into account is if you are going to do a payment plan, any future things that you have to pay on time, because otherwise that payment plan will.
Oh, okay. So the payment plan, they can't put it across years, you pay off. But if next year you fall short again, what happens next?
It defaults a payment plan and you have to essentially pay the whole amount again. They'll allow you to make a payment plan again, but they'll be a bit more strict.
Is there any time they come after your house and take away your goods?
Oh, geez, well I think, it gets to the point where they can. It will only obviously happen when it gets into very
deep and dark places.
Yeah, but they can issue things like garnishing notices where they take it straight out of your bank account, for example.
Beautiful. Look, there are some students here. You know, the issue with the students. They can work 24 hours a week only. Yeah. Right? But you're not dumb. They work full 40 hours, right? And they always have this wonder, will ATO know? How would ATO know? So what is your advice on that for them?
So obviously, if there's a specific amount of hours they can only work, then I imagine what's going through there as an employee on their pay slips is only going to be 25 hours. Anything over that couldn't be reported.
Okay.
Because if it is, then obviously it gets to the point where if the ATO report it to,
DIAC and
then it
inversion.
Yeah.
Okay, it comes to issue.
So that's probably when it would become an issue. Obviously, you're not quite sure how often they talk to each other or what the situation is there, but obviously that's how it can get found out.
Great. And is there any difference in taxation for, let's say, residents and non-residents, like permanent residents and temporary residents?
Yeah, so there's essentially three stages. So you've got, obviously you've got actually probably more. Yeah, so you've got as a non-resident. So if you've come here and you're not on a working holiday visa and you're not an Australian resident, usually taxed at non-resident rate. So they're a little higher than.
And how much is that?
The non-residents, I think it's
32.5%.
Yeah, from the first dollar. So you
it goes. So it starts at 32.5 and it can go higher.
Yes, and it starts. I'm not too sure about the exact rates, but essentially from the very first dollar is 32.5, and I think at about 45 it goes up.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
The reason is that because I went to medical school here, and I've got a lot of friends come from overseas and they're doctors. And to be a doctor, you have to go through a lot of assessments, and once you come here, you're going to be on a temporary visa and work and then go on. So, and a lot of those doctors, they come and they get contracts which is like 120,000 a year or 130,000 a year. So how does the tax bracket work? Because if they're going to start at 32,500, let's say an IMG, International Medical Graduate, comes here and they're on temporary visa and they are offered 120K a year. So do you know the bracket?
So it will depend again, number of factors. So if they're completely non-resident Australian tax purposes, that's the tax rates. If they are here on a working holiday visa, they've got working holiday rates. So they're different again. So they can be looked up on the ATO, but they're essentially slightly higher rates. Yeah, slightly higher rates than our normal tax rates as Australian residents, but less so than the non-residents. So it's specifically made for those here on working holiday.
So it's much better on a work visa. So that's a good point to know.
Yeah.
So last thing I wanted to, the next one I'm talking about is investments. Now we got Australia is a beautiful place for a lot of investment because of growth. We had 37 years of growth on growth. Let's forget about the last 2 years, but it's been a fantastic country and a lot of foreigners that want to come and invest here. So let's talk about investing to Australia as a foreigner and the taxation and the obligation here.
Yep, so again, similar to what we were discussing before. So if you're a foreign resident and you have some investments here, you essentially have to prepare a tax return here in Australia for your Australian source income. So any income from Australian real estate, from Australian investments in general, you'll have to do a tax return here. And again, you'll be paying that non-resident tax rate for anything here. So if you're a foreign investment, you've got investments here in Australia, that's essentially what's happening with your tax there. If you are an Australian resident for tax purposes and you've got obviously income from Australian sources and you've got income from foreign sources, then you're taxed on Australian source income and the foreign income as well. But the foreign income, if there's any tax taken out in those foreign countries, is taken into account as well.
Beautiful, because that was my next question. I see a lot of ads coming up and a lot of my Persian friends ask me that, hey, in the States, I can go buy a business for $50,000, $30,000. I can buy a house in, for example, Texas for like 200,000 USD and rent it out. So if an Australian resident buys something overseas, so they're both liable for taxation in Australia and that country, meaning that once they pay the taxes in that country and bring the money over here, they still have to pay taxes. Is that right?
So they do have to pay taxes, but it recognises tax paid over in the other country. So if you've received a certain amount of income overseas and it's going to be taxed at a certain amount here, and half of that is being paid in that foreign country already, you're only paying the rest of the half. So it's not double taxation at all. So it's actually quite good in that sense. So you're not ever getting double tax, just recognising the tax getting paid in other countries.
And so in that case, if you pay tax, for example, you bought something in US or Europe and you pay the tax over there, so once you bring the money here, what does it mean? You don't pay taxes?
Well, even if you don't necessarily, even if you don't bring it here, so whether you bring it here or not, the fact that you made money overseas is going to be taxable here, as if you're an Australian resident for tax purposes again. You're going to be paying tax here, but again, it will just recognise any tax paid overseas. So if you've paid more than the tax you'll pay here in Australia overseas already, then you won't have any tax to pay.
So I mean that you might get away with it in Australia if you bring the money over here or if you even keep it over there.
Yeah, so either way, it's still the same situation for you because it's still income source for you. And it's, as I said, because it's recognised tax in another country, it's not getting double taxed. So you
Ah,
don't get it
beautiful.
twice.
So, I want to get it more personal. Why do you love numbers so much?
Wouldn't say I love them. No, it's just something that I've always
What prompted you to get into accounting? Did you always like that, or?
I wouldn't say it was something that I've always thought about doing, but it is something that I got into pretty quickly after, towards the end of my school here in Australia. Something that I did get into pretty quickly, and just appreciate it. I enjoy helping people.
Tax season is coming.
Yeah.
So before that, I wanted you to give a quick wrap on the stage 3 tax code. I know this was promised under coalitions, and Labor tried to claim it for their own and doing this, but why they delayed, first of all, and second of all, what does it involve, and how an Australian household would benefit from it? Right?
Yeah. So previously, the tax cuts were very similar. There wasn't too much difference. It was a bit of variance in terms of cuts for those earning over 135. So there was a bit of a change, but essentially the new tax rates are, so anything from 0 to 18,200 is tax-free entitled. 18,200 to the 45,000 is at 16% tax rate, so that previously was at
19, so it's 3% less.
3% less. So most people are in that tax bracket. So that's obviously a bit of tax saving for everyone involved. And then anything from 45 to 135 is taxed at 30%. So that used to be, previously that was 32%, and it was from 45 to 120. So anything over 120 was then taxed at high rate again. So now that's at 30%. So everyone that's in that 45 to 135 mark, which is again bigger range to begin with, is also getting taxed a bit lower. So everyone's a bit better off unless you're earning over 135 and a certain amount above that.
That's 35% above 180k.
Yeah.
You get 45% on every dollar.
Yeah.
So making above 180k. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So do you see the taxation going down in Australia at all? Like,
look, I'd say after these, I'd say it's going to be sitting there a bit. I don't see very many changes. There might be little changes, little things for businesses or different situations, but in terms of general tax rates, I don't see any changes.
okay. Does having a partner or having a kid would be a tax write-off?
No. No, not at all. No. So it can only help in certain circumstances if your income's above a certain amount. You don't have private health insurance, where you sometimes might get hit with a Medicare-led surcharge. So that's a bit of extra tax you pay essentially because you're a high income earner and you don't have certain insurance. But other than that, there's not too much else. There is for low income small benefits, but nothing.
So if, for example, you make $150,000 and you got 2 kids, each year doesn't like, hey, let's tax you less. So that doesn't work.
No.
Okay. So why people bring so many kids?
Well, I mean, there's different benefits from sibling. So there's
okay,
that side of things. Nothing tax related.
Beautiful, mate. I'm gonna line up tomorrow. Well, so I don't have any kids right now. I'm not planning on it, but we'll see. So let's talk about super sacrifice. A lot of people out there don't know what it means, don't know the benefits, and it's a great way to reduce your tax obligations, right? And reduce your income. So I want you to talk about a bit more about super, and also and about salary sacrifice, and why it's a wiser choice. And I'll make big questions. Do you pay tax on your super?
Yeah, so look, obviously with salary sacrifice, essentially it's usually done from your pre-tax money. So essentially, instead of paying it to you, they're paying it straight to your super. So essentially, you're not getting taxed at your personal margin tax rates, which as we've discussed could be anywhere between 19 to 16.
30% or 37%.
So it's getting essentially put straight into your super fund instead, and just getting taxed in your super fund, which is getting taxed at 15%. So there's a bit of tax benefit there, and obviously just helps you put money to super and towards your retirement. So so there is obviously benefits for tax purposes, and there's also benefits for other things. But
okay, that's fantastic. Okay, great. And one question that someone asked me: can I get away with paying zero taxes in Australia? Like, is that possible?
Unless you're not making money.
So you have to still pay some taxes. You cannot get away with
unless you're earning under that
18,000, which is
which
you must be dead. Like earning like $1,500 a month. No way. You know, even if you go to Alice Spring, you can't live with that money.
No, exactly right. So, I mean, look, they're obviously, you can, if you have a business and you're spending a lot of money on new places and they're all, you know, somewhat reasonable, you can get to a point where you're paying less, obviously less or minimal tax. But generally, especially as an employee, that's if you want to be.
My tax season is coming up, and I don't want to take much of your time. I know you've got calls lined up, emails to get through, and a busy day. So tax season is coming up, right? So what should the audience out there need to know, right? And what is to expect?
Yeah, look, obviously tax season. So as soon as June finishes up, July comes through. See new tax returns being ready to lodge for 2024 financial year. So yeah, look, it's just a matter of depending on what kind of industry you're in, what you're working in. As for small businesses, for example, obviously it's potentially time to have a chat to your accountant, see what kind of profits you have, see if it's worth it for you to make any improvements or any capital improvements. So purchase a new car, purchase new equipment, purchase anything for work. See whether there's a tax benefit there. And for individuals, it just depends what industry they're in. If it's something for work, it might be time to potentially upgrade something like a laptop.
So basically meaning that going to the website, the ATO's website, looking at additions and deductions, and based on the industry, find out what they can deduct, what they can claim. They get in touch with an accountant like you to do the full profit and loss and let them know about how much is overhanging and what to do to minimize those taxations.
Yeah, exactly right. So especially for, as I said, especially for small business, have a look at what kind of income you have for the year, have a look at what kind of expenses, what profits left over, how much tax that means.
Yeah.
And then if you bought a certain asset, how much that was going to reduce your tax, and that will be obviously help make a decision of whether to buy or
Mate, fantastic. I've got so much more questions, so many more questions to ask, but I wanted to take it long. I'm sure there's gonna be heaps of questions coming out of this, and I'm sure you're not gonna do this more. Mark, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for your time.
No, that's okay.
Guys, Mark is a chartered accountant based in Gosford, Sydney, but he looks after the whole country. So just drop him a message, and he can get down to you. So I'm gonna put the link to the website below in the description, and also link to his LinkedIn account. He's a good-looking bloke. Look at his LinkedIn, all shaped up, And Mark, thank you so much for your time. Is there any closing statements you want to have? Anything you wanted to?
No, look, that's it really. I think you've covered most of the important things at the moment anyway. And yeah, if there's anyone that has questions, just feel free to reach out and
thank you so much, mate. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. What did you think?
Yeah, it was good.
Good?
Yeah.
Mark, one question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm a sole trader.
Yeah.
I'm working on it again.
Yeah.
Do I have to lodge and contribute to my super?
No. So it's completely your choice how much you put in. Obviously, what you do put in is going to be a tax deduction. So you're going to save tax on anything that you do put in, but it's not a requirement. No.
So I've read online somewhere saying that ATO requires you to do minimum $6,000 a year contribution to your super. So what's that about? So
it might be referring to potentially if you are an employer. So if you are operating your business through a company and you're paying yourself. Where you have to pay super on top.
So that's the only part that you have to do. And what about those nasty employers who don't pay your super? Because you're not every 12 months to have to consolidate. What if you can't see this guy didn't pay? So how can you follow that up?
Yeah, so if you, so obviously super needs to be paid every 3 months. So there's very strict deadlines that the ATO have that as soon as the quarter ends, the month afterwards, super needs to be paid by your employer. If not, if it's obviously not getting paid at all or getting paid late, you can obviously have to talk to the employer about it, but you can also go to the ATO. And if you go to the ATO and essentially tell them, I don't think they're paying my super, they'll essentially let the dog out on them and attest them to essentially to pay it or pay it. And if they haven't paid it at all, they'll actually chase them to pay it and interest on top to cover the fact that you lost money and it hasn't been invested in time. So yeah, so it's quite a headache for employers if you do that. So yeah. Good.
Thank you.
That's okay. Always.
Good. Awesome. Mate, you did a really, really good job. Yeah. I know this guy for a few years, and if you own a business, if you ever want to get to know anything on taxes, hit up this guy. He's always available. Like you're really friendly and very knowledgeable, man. He spends the time with you because some tax accountants, man, they want to get you out of the door before you get in there. You don't want to spend time, get out. Just spend money, get out. But he's amazing, and Mate, thank you so much for being such a good bloke and being such a good guy.